Welcome to a chilling journey into one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries in American history. Between 1962 and 1964, the Boston Strangler terrorized the city, leaving a trail of fear and unanswered questions. Join us as we delve into the gripping details of this case, exploring the mind of a killer and the relentless hunt for justice. Theodore Henry DeSalvo was born in Chelsea, Massachusetts, on September 3, 1931. DeSalvo had a hard childhood because he is one of 5 brothers. His father was an alcoholic who beat his mother and sometimes DeSalvo and his brothers. When he was 6, the boy learned how to shoplift. He then turned into a bad kid and went to and from jail for violence and minor crimes. He also went to reform school. After DeSalvo joined the U.S. boxing champion among the men in Europe while in the U.S. Army. While on a tour in Germany, he met Irmgard Beck, a girl from Germany. They got married and then went back to the United States. They had a simple life, and even though Irmgard had a girl with physical problems, the family was able to make ends meet. Irmgard knew that DeSalvo had a strong libido, so she tried to stay away from him because she didn't want to have another child with a disability. But their second child was a healthy boy, and DeSalvo seemed to become a good family man. His co-workers and boss liked and respected him for this. He was also known for being a huge braggart, which may have been why the cops didn't believe him when he said he was the Strangler. But by the time he was 29, DeSalvo was a big, strong man who had broken into homes before. A strange series of peeping Tom adventures had also started. He would knock on women's doors, act like he was a model scout, and then, if he was lucky enough to get in, measure up to the woman. The sexual crimes got DeSalvo the nickname Measuring Man, and he spent 18 months in prison for them. DeSalvo worked as a handyman and in a workplace when he wasn't in jail. Between June 1962 and January 1964, a series of grisly murders took place in the Boston area. All 13 victims were women, and all but 2 had been strangled. Because of this, the Boston Strangler is sometimes only blamed for 11 killings. The fact that many of the victims were adults or older makes these killings stand out in the history of serial killings. When old, alone, and weak are all put together, they make the events even more brutal and tragic. Part of the reason no one was tried for the Boston murders was that there wasn't enough physical proof. However, most people think DeSalvo was the person who did it. Anna Sleezers, a 55-year-old tailor who went to church every week, was the first person killed on the evening of June 14, 1962. She lived by herself in a small room in a brick house in Boston at 77 Gainsborough. St. Juris, her son, was supposed to pick her up to take her to a funeral service. Juris thought she had killed herself when he found her body in the bathroom with a cord around her neck that was tied in a bow. James Mellon and John Driscoll, 2 homicide officers, found Sleezers in a very bad way, naked and without any respect. It had been a sexual attack. Many things from Sleezer's purse were lying around on the floor, making the flat look like it had been broken into. A gold watch and other items were left behind, even though it looked like someone had stolen them. The cops decided that it was a failed burglary. In just under 3 weeks, on June 28, 1962, the body of Mary Mullen, aged 85, was also found in her home. Mullen died of a heart attack. According to the autopsy, Nina Nichols' body was also found in the Brighton area of Boston, 2 days later. She was 68 years old. Again, it looked like a break-in, even though the expensive silver seemed to be unharmed. Detectives didn't understand why the house was being searched. Nichols was also found naked, with her legs spread out and her stocking tops tied in a bow. On the same day, another body was found in the neighborhood of Lynn, which is a few miles north of Boston. Helen Blake was 65 years old and had been divorced. She was killed in a more horrific way. She had cuts and scrapes on her private parts. The bow was clear again. This time, it was made by tying her bra around her neck. The scene looked like a theft, like the other crimes. It became clear after this cruel killing that Boston had a serial killer living there. Because of how bad things were, Police Commissioner Edmund McNamara canceled all police leave, and Boston's women were warned through the media. Women were told to keep their doors locked and watch out for strange people. Based on their profile, the police had already decided that they were most likely looking for a maniac who hates older women and may have a problem with his relationship with his mother. It wasn't long before McNamara's worries came true. 5 people were brutally killed at 7 Grove Garden in Boston's West End on August 19. Ida Irga, a 75-year-old widow, was killed. She was lying on her back on the floor, having been choked. Her brown nightgown was torn, showing her body. With her legs spread out, she was sitting on 2 chairs with a cushion under her bottom. Once more, there were no signs of breaking in. In less than 24 hours, Jane Sullivan's body was found at 435 Columbia Road in Dorchester, not far from where the first victim had been. Last week, a 65-year-old nurse was killed, and her body was found in the bathroom. Her own nylons had choked her to death. Boston was scared because they thought there would be another attack, but it would be 3 months before the Strangler did it again. This time, the victim was young. Sophie Clark was a black student who was 21 years old and always worried about her safety. She rarely went on dates. On December 5, 1962, her body was found a few blocks away from Sleezer's. Clark was found without any clothes on and had been raped. 3 weeks later, another young woman died in a terrible way. Stephanie Bissett, who was 23 years old, was found dead in her flat near where Sleezer's and Clark had lived. Her boss found out about Bissett when she didn't show up for work. Her body was on her bed with blankets over it. She had been raped and strangled with her own stockings. The city didn't seem to be attacked again for a few months, so the police worked very hard to find any link between the women and anyone they might have known. The police in Boston talked to and checked on every sex offender on their list, but nothing was found. 5 more women were killed later on. As it turned out, the killer wasn't found by police work, but by chance. When DeSalvo got out of jail for breaking and entering, he did even worse crimes. He broke into a woman's room, put her on the bed, tied her up, and put a knife to her throat. He then raped her and left. The person who was harmed gave the cops a good description that matched a sketch of the criminal from another crime. Not long after that, DeSalvo was arrested. DeSalvo admits to robbing hundreds of apartments and raping a couple of women after he was picked out in an identity parade. In 1965, while being held by police at Bridgewater State Hospital before his trial, DeSalvo admitted that he was the Boston Strangler and that he had killed 13 people. He was put in touch with a lawyer named F. Lee Bailey, who later became O.J. Simpson, and psychologists looked at him. Bailey told DeSalvo's wife that her husband had admitted to being the strangler. The wife couldn't believe it and thought he was just lying to get paid by the press. DeSalvo became friends with another prisoner at Bridgewater. His name is George Nasser, and he is a smart but very dangerous killer. There was evidence that the two had agreed to split prize money that would go to anyone who helped them find the strangler. DeSalvo knew he would spend the rest of his life in jail and wanted his family to be able to afford a good home. Bailey talked to DeSalvo to find out if he was really the infamous killer. The lawyer was shocked when DeSalvo talked about the killings in such great detail, down to the furniture in the victims' apartments. DeSalvo knew what to do. He thought that he could prove to the psychiatric board that he was crazy and spend the rest of his life in jail. Bailey could then write his story and sell it to make money for his family. Bailey wrote the 1971 book, The Defense Never Rests, in which he explains how DeSalvo was able to stay hidden. Bailey was sure his client was the Boston Strangler after a second visit, and hearing DeSalvo tell in horrible detail how he killed 75-year-old Ida Irga. The cool man told him that attractiveness had nothing to do with it when he asked DeSalvo why he picked a target that old. At the end of many hours of questioning and going over every little thing about the victim's clothes and apartments, both Bailey and the cops were sure they had caught the killer. DeSalvo, who was 35 years old at the time, was found guilty of sexual assault, burglary, and robbery in a separate case in January 1967 and given a life term. He was locked up in Massachusetts at Walpole State Prison, which is now called MCI Cedar Junction. In November 1973, he told his doctor that he had to see him right away because DeSalvo had important things to say about the Boston Strangler killings. But DeSalvo was killed by stabbing in jail the night before they were supposed to meet. The high level of protection in the prison makes it likely that the killing on November 25, 1973, was planned with some help from both staff and prisoners. No matter what happened, the Strangler case was never closed, even though the killer stopped killing people after DeSalvo was caught. What are your thoughts on the Boston Strangler case? Do you believe Albert DeSalvo was the true perpetrator, or do you think there's more to the story? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this video informative, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more intriguing stories from the world of crime and mystery.